So, nothing is permanent in education. And if I, be so bold as to kind of periodize what's been going on in the last 60 or so years, perhaps with particular reference to England and Wales, because Scotland and Northern Ireland have always had something different going on. But I hope what I'm showing you is actually more or less good enough to cover the whole of the UK. So I would argue, and I'm happy to engage in conversation after this, okay, that between 1950s and 70s, the 50s is arbitrary, but that's the first time in the post-Second World War when large numbers of new Commonwealth citizens came to the UK and settled in, mostly industrial areas in the north as well as in London and so on. It was then called, if it was called anything at all, it was called English as a foreign language, because the new pupils were regarded as just little foreigners coming to our country. And the job of the teaching of English really was to teach English as a system, that is the linguistic system of English, but often linked, contextualized into some sort of everyday use. And I think just, I imagine that many of you here would not be teaching in the 1950s, might not have been doing that work then. So I thought it might be worth just 1 minute of digression for me to show what I mean here, okay? So if you take, for example, the Schools Council material, scope materials, this was a kind of government-funded set of official, what was then ESL materials for teachers to use, okay? This kind of initiative doesn't exist anymore, but it was then. And so you can see, this is the kind of thing that they advise teachers, okay? Students have to master the way words are put together and the correct form of those words. In other words, grammar, structure, okay? And then they contextualize the grammar and structure in some sort of everyday, socially relevant themes. And because they were regarded as, kind of like outsiders arriving into our school system and our community, they perhaps need a little bit of induction into the way things are done. So you get this kind of stuff. This is out of a page in the Scope 1 material. Now, some people here I can see already recognize this, not that particular page. But some people, and this is why I'm sort of showing you, because actually, just as I'm periodizing official policy perspective, it doesn't mean in reality these things are completely sort of, bounded, because I bet you find this in some schools. Some schools use headway material, for example, it look like that. And the idea is to, well, you guys never been in a house before, learn the vocabulary, learn how to talk about walking up the stairs and this kind of thing, okay? Anyway, I think I've said enough. In the 1980s to 1990s, there's been a kind of, as it were, a shift, okay? The shift really was moving away from this notion of these, little kind of outsiders joining us. But now the terminology is linguistic minorities. So these minority people, young people, have equal social and educational entitlement. So therefore, they're no longer to be treated as it were, something like outside the system. And the terminology shifted. The name became second, and increasingly a little bit, but mostly second language, so ESL. And I'm sure many of colleagues in the room might have been working in that period, and will remember that part of the day was really engaged in, amongst other things, trying to integrate the children into the mainstream classes, sometimes engage in some sort of, unpleasant, hostile conversations with our colleagues, because colleagues say, well, they don't speak English, they can't come in, and we say, well, no, with my help, I'm the support teacher, they can do it, So it's part of that anti-racist, foreigner type of thing. And in the name of equal opportunities. But by and large, the idea of teaching English was no longer doing that little thing to show you how to live in Britain, but to actually think in terms of how you succeed within the curriculum. So engagement in the mainstream activities pretty much was the catch cry of the day. And by the 2000s, we've got a completely different kind of terminology again. So we are now equal citizens, no matter what our differences, but equal in a diverse society. And English is now an additional language. And then the terminology gets marketized into this kind of commercial neoliberal discourse. Our job is to deliver the mainstream curriculum and to raise achievement, not to learn English as an additional language. And English as an additional language is actually an appendix, if at all, to English, the subject. And for reasons that I've stated, okay? But is this a good scene? I like to be optimistic, so let's take our policymakers' word for it. Yes, we've got a new opportunity, okay? And from now on, we ought to be thinking critically for ourselves, engaging with the kind of things that both Kenneth and Amy have raised earlier.